Going live. Cool.
Cool.
Um,
Very good.
Ripping. Well, I guess we're pretty close to the end of the year here and a happy new year. So good to see you, Paul. I'm glad you showed up for the last one.
Hey, good to see you, Nick, too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the last one of the year, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. We got a couple of the usual suspects on the chat here. Although I haven't seen, is that Magician? But Guillermo Algernon Sour Gravy, seen you before. Always good to see you. Uh, Robert Putt. Oh, geez. We got some foul language coming in hot then. If Rob's here. Oh, what's up, Joey? Let's see if I can bring you in here. There we go. There's Joey. Okay.
Hey, Joey.
Hello.
Heyo. And apparently, Joe, you're about to go down hard from the worst cold in the world. So thanks for coming on, and sticking with it.
I'll live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ripping. Well, fellas, it's been a while since I've seen you guys on the show. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about, but what's new in your world?
Uh, on my end, just had a great sort of adventure around the Southwest. So a lot of mapping and a lot of hiking around. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, nice little reset. Looking forward to getting into the next year.
I saw some pictures of you in the canyon. I mean, the American Southwest is kind of my favorite part of the entire world. So I was
Yeah,
good
it
to see
was
that.
beautiful out there. It was like cold and snowy and not too hot. That was perfect for me.
Right on. Yeah, Paul, what's going on with you, man? How's France holding up?
Yeah, France is, quite good. We had eat a lot, as French guys are eating every time, and particularly on Christmas. So I think I have ate all what I can for the whole year. So now I have to be at rest.
Right on. Let's see. So the last time, I forget the last time we were all on the show together, but since then, I've been diving into this whole LNS chirp stack thing, and to me, it's like diving into a swimming pool. You bounce high on the diving board, you go up super high and do this nice swan dive, and then you realize there's no water in the pool. It's been a really difficult thing to kind of wrap my head around and figure out. But Paul, you've been doing this for a while, so that's pretty cool. And we got all of that stuff kind of coming up. So let's talk first about what you guys are thinking about this whole LNS piece coming online in the first quarter of 2023. Yeah, how's that
Yes,
going
it's
to work?
good.
What are the challenges and opportunities there?
What honest? I work most of my time on this
Yeah.
currently, and I'm writing some code to make a chip stack working with Helium API.
Yep.
So in my side, it's progressing well. And there is a demo environment. It's on dev.helium-iot.eu. But you can't really use it, in fact, as you need to have, it's a test net, so you need to have a hotspot connected to this test net. But you can take a look at how does it looks like. So currently, everything is operational. Just the payment part is not there. So you get some free DCs when you join the system, but you can purchase more. So that's the next step. So this next step is the last one, which is mandatory to have something which is fully working as
Yeah.
the existing solution, and I hope it could be ready for end of, for sure end of January.
Right.
It will be operational. So this is quite progressing.
Yeah.
What I've seen that the Nova part, which manages the packet routing, is also progressing well. But maybe Joey can tell us more on this. But yeah, it's in a good way.
Joey, what do you
Yeah.
got
No,
there?
I've been excitedly following all of Paul's developments. We've got like an internal channel. He's been helping us do a lot of testing.
It's like a Paul tracker.
And it's a Paul tracker.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really exciting because he's just churning out code and like doing it. I have to dig in because you've done some stuff that I'm not actually quite sure how you did it, and so it'll be fun to sort of dig in and see what you've done there. Um, but yeah, this is all sort of under this umbrella of this thing that Amir announced at Breakpoint called OpenLNS, which I'm you know internally still fighting on the name, but I think we're going to go with OpenLNS. But the general idea is that anyone can come and bring NLNS into the Helium network. So whether that's ChirpStack or like in anything like AWS IoT Core or any of this kind of stuff, like you receive packets from the Helium network on it, which is super cool because it's all driving at this story of data usage. But um, all of this stuff comes with complications. Like our model is, like this is like if we were building phone companies, in the 1900s or whenever that happened, right?
Yeah.
Except that you turn the whole model on the head, and instead of the phone company getting paid for the service, the phone on your wall gets paid for the service. Uh, so you have to kind of think of things in a sort of backwards way when it's, trying to make sure that there's no avenues for gaming and all of that kind of stuff. But I think we've got it all pretty well sorted out. Oh yeah, there's a
Okay, so we
question
had a
there. What?
couple things in there that I think are like classic questions, and
Yeah.
this is it's super interesting to me because this is kind of my world. This is where we're seeing this intersection of, I think it was like deep tech. Like it really takes some significant expertise and experience to understand what's going on, and certainly to improve it in the way that you guys are doing. And I've been really struggling with that on the kind of sidelines. Like, dude, what is going on? How does the system work? So LoRaWAN network server, or LNS is LoRaWAN network server. And
Hmm.
if we think of like how this whole system works, you've got a sensor on the ground somewhere providing information
Hmm.
that sends it out via LoRa, and that can send it out via a ton of different networks that are all part of the LoRa Alliance. So that could send it out on TTN or Helium, or I mean, I just was looking at the Alliance members who pay for what is it, an EUI? There's like, I don't know, 40 or 60 of them. There's a ton of people who are paying for this.
Net IDs.
Net IDs, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Joey. It's like, God, I can't even keep up with the terminology. And then that information goes through some Net ID. Someone has said like, hey, I'll take care of sorting all this out, and then it comes to an LNS. Is that right?
Hmm.
Yep.
So the way it works
Yeah. Walk me through
is
it.
the device is going to have its keys, right? And it's going to send out a little hello out into
Yep.
the world, and it says like, hey, is anyone out there? Can I join your network? And then that LNS is going to hear that, and it's going to respond with a message that encodes that net ID. So then that device has the choice of whether it wants to join that net ID or a different net ID, right? So if you wanted to build a device that only joined Helium or only joined TTN, you would encode that net ID into that device so that it only joins that one network. Otherwise, it's going to try and join whatever network responds and gets that packet to it first.
Yep. And then the cool thing about the Net ID piece is that once you buy that, and they're what, $3 to $4 grand a year, something like that. Like it's not a small amount, but it's not so big that you can't do it. Is you can then
Mhm.
sign roaming agreements with anyone else on in the entire LoRaWAN alliance and roam onto their
Yep.
networks. And that's kind of the big offer of Helium is like just roam on our network. We got the biggest one. Use it.
Yeah. So yeah, going into the next year, anyone that has a net ID, and I wouldn't expect really anyone on this. I'm not going to have a net ID. That'd be crazy. It's too expensive.
GK might.
I'm
I'm
also
thinking
not
about it,
running my
Joey. I
own
totally
network,
want
right?
one, but I got to have someone like Paul like saying like, "Hey, you dummy, don't do this," or like, "Here's a great way to do it." Because I think, yeah,
Well, the reason you would have one is you're running your own large private network of LoRaWAN gateways. So
yeah,
it'd be like, I'm not going to run these things on Helium. I'm going to go run them, uh, you know, my
something
own
else. Yep,
stuff, right? And
yep,
then I'm going to have this net ID that encapsulates that whole network. And then if you want access to Helium's global coverage, then you'd go sign up for roaming with us, and then you'd be off to the races.
yeah.
And
Paul,
basically,
are
what happens is
good.
all of the packets we receive that are addressed to your net ID just get blasted over to you.
Yep,
Well,
Paul, are you going to
I
run
mean, we
your own
can
Net ID or
compare
no?
this. Yeah, no, no. We can compare this as a range of IP address. I mean, it's like buying a class A or class B or class C of IP addresses. So um, if you just have a device and you need to connect to internet for your laptop, you won't buy a range of IP addresses.
Right.
If
Yep.
you have a farm of servers and you are a service provider or cloud service provider, you're gonna have to invest in an IP range. So it's quite the same thing. So
Okay.
if you want to operate a network, you need to have a net ID. But if you are just a user of a network, and whatever the network is, you don't need this. This will be given by the network, the service provider
Got it.
you will connect through.
So you're not
And
using one.
so
You're building kind of your chirp stack to work with Helium. Am I getting that right or no?
I mean, when we build it with Chipstack, we use the Helium one.
Okay.
And what you need is you have a dev address, and the dev address are part. In fact, they are like IPs in the IP range. So you are investing in dev address. You, for example, have 16 or 32 or whatever. Okay,
Yep.
and they are in the subnet of the Helium net IDs.
Got it. I just had to learn
So
all this shit
basically,
because
you
I got a
buy
bunch of public static IPs for paleo treats and had to like figure out like what does this crap mean. But it's
I
crazy
hear a
because
blog post coming. Yeah.
oh my god, dude, there's so much. I just put one out on the people counter because that's been incredibly challenging to get that thing up and working, and I wanted people to kind of know where it was. But let's see. So to go back to this chirp stack thing, because I think that's kind of the biggest and most important piece of news we got coming down the pipe, is that means sometime by end of January you can reach out to someone like Paul and say, hey, I've got a bunch of sensors in like a local or a network I want to run, and I want you to do like all the technical lifting, so that all I have to do is deploy sensors and then get the data. Is that kind of how you're
yeah.
looking at it, Paul, or not? Not really. Is there more aspects to
Yeah,
it?
in fact, it's something I already do with heliumiot.eu. So people can come with a fleet and join the console that exists currently. And
Yeah.
I mean, we have something like 7,000 devices that are active currently in the platform. So it works well. And this fleet will be migrated to ShipStack as soon as it's going to be available. So it will be transferred. One other thing we do is we do ShipStack as a service or console as a service. So if someone has a fleet and want to keep it private and separate environment, they can ask, and we can build the infrastructure for this. I mean, people are getting benefits of for, I mean, my experience on managing this, and
Yeah.
so
Huge.
basically,
It's huge. I mean,
it's
and we're going to see a
similar kind
couple.
of.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to figure out what it is. Is pricing on that public, or is that kind of per client on a per client basis?
Yeah, there's a public pricing. So the public pricing is based on a console. I have to review this a bit with the Shipstock environment. But basically there is on the website there is price, including communication and so on. It's we have different class of subscription based on the service level you want and based on the size of the fleet. So this is something we are going to review a bit with Shipstock and more working on SLA, because I mean previously with Helium IoT we are more best effort SLA, but we may have some opportunity to have some customer with high expectation in terms of SLA. So I mean, I'm working with other company able to support 24/7, and so we are being able to propose SLA with 24/7 support and so on. So yeah, based on this, we're gonna make some new offer.
Yeah.
And what also is important to me is that all what we do is open source. So I mean, anyone who wants to deploy its own chip stack with all the stuff around can do it. On my GitHub, there is everything available. And part of this Christmas break, I've finished to document all the installation guide and so on. So this is on my blog. So that's basically, I mean, in less than 1 hour, you can deploy your chip stock and my code run to manage it. So if you want to manage it on your own, you can do that. And if you want someone to do it for you and be more confident
Yeah. Yeah. If
and
you
be
want it to work, you can hire
expert,
Paul. Yeah.
you
Totally.
yeah.
But I think that's the big takeaway. Like, by the way, I just remembered we were all supposed to wear Santa hats.
Yeah. No,
Fail.
I remember too. All I got is a gorilla mask over in the closet. That's as close as I can get. It's like, it's not a
That's
Santa
not
hat.
close at all.
No.
No. But but I think the big takeaway is like all of this sort of like NetID, OUI, address stuff. Like we're, Paul and I and sort of the nerdier folks are going to get into this stuff, and they might think about running their own instances of these things. But at the end of the day, like you don't have to think about any of this stuff to use the network. Like
No.
you can go
No.
buy an off-the-shelf device that just like works right out of the box
Yep.
because it's all pre-configured,
Yep.
or you can go sign up for a service that like Paul's running and do your own experimentation and stuff without ever having to touch all that stuff.
That's a super good point, Joey. So I think the way I think of it is it's as if you're walking by like a construction site where they're building a giant, commercial building, and you see them here in San Diego. They dig a hole in the ground to put in the parking garage, and it takes a couple months, and you're seeing all the, earth movers and super expensive stuff, and then they put the, steel girders in, then they put the walls up, and the rest. Like that's what we're seeing right now with all this OUI and NetID and the rest. Like you don't need to know how to build a giant building. At the end of it, all you do is walk in the door, you rent a room, and you do your business. And that's probably the best way to think of it. But it's for some of us, it's fascinating to watch that building being built and to try and wrap our heads around as much of it as we can. Certainly,
Yeah.
I'm in that camp.
And
Holy smokes, that's tough.
going back to the base of it, like this is real infrastructure, right? Like
Yeah.
this stuff really works. This is stuff that you can jump in and use and build businesses on. And I think that is my like baseline exciting everyday part of this.
Yeah. In fact, behind me, so there used to be a couch behind me. Probably the last time we were all on together, there's a couch. And what I did is like, all right, 2023 is going to be the year of the sensor for me. Where I'm just going to put a ton of sensors in. So I got rid of the couch. I sold it. It was super comfortable. I'm bummed it's gone. And I bought this desk on whatever OfferUp, and I've just filled the fucking thing with sensors. So it's like, I don't know how much I spend on sensors, but like every time they come in, I just unwrap and put them on the desk. Like, okay, one more to get on here. And just the other day, I got, let me show you the one that I got. This guy right here. So this is my latest little sensor. This is a MileSight AM319, I think. And it shows, temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide in the air, ozone, a bunch of other stuff. And I just wanted to see, like, what does this stuff look like when a person actually does it? And it was, aside from my inability or like ignorance about how an NFC works and how close it has to be, everything is super easy. Like we're getting to the point, faster and faster where it gets easier and easier to put a sensor on the network and then actually use that data. And I think that's
awesome.
an exciting piece.
Did this device come like all pre-configured and you just scanned it with an app kind of and it was off to the races, or what was the process there?
Kind of, yeah. So it came, let's see. It's a great question because this came from MileSight. I think MileSight, I remember when I was on the European tour, I was meeting, I think it was Charbel and the guy at Heliotics, who I'm embarrassingly forgetting his name right now. I'll get in a second. Yeah, it's like when you're put on the spot. But
Miro, yeah.
Yeah, Miroslav, yeah, that's right. Those guys are like, hey, these MileSight sensors are amazing. They're super easy. So I went home and bought a couple of them, and this was one of them. And it arrived without any of the three, or actually with like just two of the three things you need. So the Devi UI, the App UI, and the App Key are the three things you need. And so it was a little bit of a pain in the ass to get those things out of them. They sent me like a PDF document. And because I bought 4 sensors, it was super weird how they set it up. Like the App UIs were on one page, and then the Devi UIs were on another page, and then the App Keys were on the 4th page, and none of them were labeled. So you just had to kind of guess and figure it out. And I think like that's kind of normal. Like that's what I expect to happen with this early kind of stage of it. But other than that, super easy to set up. You basically like plug it in, add it to console, copy and paste all those things in, and then yeah, it just works. It's like magic.
Cool. Yeah.
And that's a level where you can hack your system, and it's cool when it's really prepackaged and it gets really simple, but it's still hard for developers basically. And so I really think that's what is important is to have devices that are ready to use. Applications that are serving a specific purpose, like getting your home, making your home smart, or monitoring your building, or I don't know, whatever. But something you just a device, you switch it on, and that works. And you have your mobile with an application, and on this one you can access the data and manipulate this. Eventually, an API if you want to consume the data to automate with, I don't know, Alexa or anything like this. But that's, in fact, if we want to have volume, this is what is really important, in fact, is use this just like a simple device, no development, no settings.
Nothing. Yeah, just like a QR thing. And I think let's see. I just put on. So we're starting to fire back up the thing that used to be Helium Hacks Happy Hour with Travis. When Travis left Nova, he took some time off, and there's a bunch of us who are like, dude, keep doing that. Let's figure it out. And so Travis and I have been doing these on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific. We just got the second one done 2 days ago, and kind of sharing that back because I think sharing that information is super cool. But those guys walked me through getting this Vision AI camera on board,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like a QR code. And as long as you can follow instructions and not be overwhelmed by 10 geeks telling you like all of the things you can do with it, it's really easy to set up. And I think we're just, when I look at like where we were when I put my first sensor on, which was like that LHT 65, and where we are now, some things are similar. And then there's, in other places, there's been a ton of progress in how easy it is to get a sensor on board and using the data.
I've got a couple Seed Studio sensors on the way to me. They'll be here in a couple of days. Actually, I'm really excited to start playing with those because
Oh yeah.
I've seen
Yeah,
like
Paul.
Violet and like the team do demos at conferences, and it's just like, wow, it's finally easy. So
Yeah.
I'll actually get to be doing it myself.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
you've got the K1100 right there, Paul. Is that the kit?
yeah, that's a K900.
Yep.
And I mean, it's funny you're talking about EA and Vision and some of this because I mean I use with some of my students, and so we use the YO terminal, which is I mean quite good for. I don't really like it for doing IoT. It's strange to me to saying that, but because I did a lot of things with this. But I mean, the autonomy of such a device is not really long. You need to plug it on a power like I mean electrical power.
Yeah.
It cannot work on battery for a long time, so it's good for doing a mapper as I
Yep.
did, for example. But it's a bit complex. If you want to monitor, I don't know, your the moisture of your flowers, for example. It would be strange to have a USB cable
Yeah.
ready
No, it's
to
a little geeky.
okay, but it's really cool for learning and for students because you have the screen, you have all the button, everything. It's Arduino based, so that's quite good. And for next week, I have to work with this tiny camera. You can plug on it
Oh, so cool.
to analyze images and doing so EA to recognize a color, form, or something like this, and then to report this through LoRaWAN. So you also have the LoRaWAN module,
Yep.
and so you can plug all of this to the YO terminal,
Yeah.
and so you can detect something and report it on a Helium network
Yep.
to get an alarm or doing any analysis you want. And
Totally.
that's quite fun. We're gonna do that in 4 hours, so shouldn't that be so complex?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the takeaway here is that I get a lot of questions about basically like what do I do with Helium now, right? So putting out like 619 is saying like when are off grid's going to be profitable again? I get like when is my Helium hotspot going to be profitable again? And I think like hey, the answer to that is never. Those will never be profitable. That will never happen again. Like that time has passed. However, and that was like a very short period of time. That was a spike in I guess profitability or HNT or whatever. What is coming now is this steadily growing kind of wave of opportunity. And I think if you're watching this and you've been interested in Helium and you still think like, hey, there's something here, that if you spent the first 3 months of 2023 learning how to use sensors, and Paul's got great videos, Joey's got great videos, I've got a couple things out there, there's tons and tons of resources on the internet. I think by the end of March 2023, you could be on the leading edge of an enormous ecosystem. And have a good idea of kind of where you could go and what you can do. But it'll take work. It'll take learning this stuff and figuring it out. But what we're seeing here is, in the long term, this is the birth of a new industry, and it's a super cool thing to be a part of. But the first parts are going to be tough.
One
I see
little
the
thing I
comment
want to
that
add.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
One little thing I want to add on the story of like profitability is we need to find like the right stats to tell this story the right way. But I don't know if you've seen this as well, Nick, but like the highest earning hotspots now are not in cities, right? It's on the periphery. It's in little small towns with 2 or 3 other hotspots. Like my hotspot at my parents' house is like my best earning HNT hotspot because there's only like 4 other,
Hotspots. All right. And
hotspots
it's
out
hitting the
there,
HIP 15,
right?
17 stuff. Okay.
Yeah, and so like the exciting thing is this is actually starting to become that pressure that we wanted to see of like expanding into rural areas.
Yep.
We've already got like massive density in all of the urban areas, but part of my little like Southwest tour was like driving around in these weird little desert towns and being like, wait, there's two hotspots here, and this whole town's covered. Like this is
Yeah.
cool.
Did you go through
Um,
Moab?
did not go through Moab. No, I didn't
Okay.
make it that far.
I got a buddy. I
Um,
put a hotspot, or I gave him a hotspot. He still has to put it up in his house. Put
I
like three
I
hotspots now.
was driving around right underneath where all of the the paragliding was going on.
Oh, in
Um,
Salt Lake.
so, south of Salt Lake.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
Point of the mountain.
yeah,
Yep, for sure.
yep.
Right on.
No, Zion and all that. So
Yeah,
Bryce Canyon.
beautiful part of the world. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and I guess maybe then I'm wrong then, as far as it will never be profitable in the technical sense, but it'll never go back to like paying your mortgage, which is what it used to do.
Yeah. No, you're not gonna
Right.
like. This is not like when Lambo, like there's like never Lambo, right?
Yep.
But you could buy a hotspot and you can set it up and you can provide coverage and there's going to be utility there and you're going to get rewarded for that data transfer. And you'll get a small, HNT on the side for that.
Yep.
But also like our market economics, like as earnings go down, like people are not going to like pay as much attention to their hotspots, and it's sort of tied into token value and all of that other stuff.
Yeah.
If token value returns, then anyone who's been mining an HNT a week is going to be
Pretty
stoked,
stoked.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, I look at like, look, if I'm kind of running a business, which God knows I love running businesses and business opportunities. If I look at what could I do in 2023 to maximize the helium opportunity, it's going to look a lot more like what Paul is doing. Maybe not at that level of expertise, but like actually using the network and deploying it as a like some part of it as a service, whether it's sensors or the LNS or
What I
something,
think,
versus like
what I
trying to
think
earn
is
off
really
HNT.
uh, what I think is really interesting is there is a large community and a large coverage for the network, and the hotspot owner are easy to touch through the community. So it's really interesting for service provider to propose solutions that can be for I mean like smart home or eventually smart cities or I mean smart business basically. And there is I mean that's quite interesting because when you are doing IoT, if you I mean if I take an example of a big company like Sigfox or like Obgenius in France, which was a LoRaWAN provider.
Yep.
They are companies that are talking to business, and they have to explain what is LoRaWAN or what is Sigfox, what they can do with IoT, blah blah blah, and they can touch companies that have to think about a business model and to find a way to reach people to sell something and so on. But here, if you have grid ID, like I mean home automation or something useful for people, you have a way to touch a large community that could be interested because they know that they have the network. They can be good customer, or they can eventually be good relay also because I mean
Yeah.
they know that I mean you have a hotspot, you are covering the zone 1 or 10 kilometer around, so potentially, you can be a reseller for a solution because you are providing the coverage, and
Yeah.
you can go to your neighborhood and propose solution. So maybe there is a model like this because one thing which is a bit complex for Helium is that I mean all the companies, all the telco companies, they are paying thousands of commercial people that go to the companies and say, "Oh, we have the best IoT solution." Blah 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 blah. Never use Helium. They are community guys. It's a bad. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Okay, this guy are doing this basically, and we will never have this in Helium. But what we have is somewhere something like 200,000 commercial people that can use the device, that can propose solution to others, and so on. So if we create an ecosystem, that could be really interesting
Yeah.
with solution that can be distributed by people, and it's real economy. That's quite interesting. I mean, it's that's good. It's not especially
It's
a
super
token economy,
exciting.
but it's
Yeah. Yeah.
real economy.
I mean, we're seeing folks like you, Paul, kind of running this. We're seeing Rob Putt is in the chat with TrackPack doing the TrackPack thing. I think they're going to run ChirpStack as a service as well. I see Daniel in the chat with Hotspotty. I think he's in a car on his way somewhere. But I think we're going to see all of these companies kind of figuring out what aspect of the ecosystem they're going to service, and then they're going to help build that thing. Like we're seeing this thing happen. We're watching the building being built up, and to look at a building where they're digging out the parking lot and to say, I can't imagine what that thing is going to be like. That'll never be a building. They'll never finish that. Is silly, right? It's just like they're just at the part where they're digging the parking lot. They're not at the part where they cut the ribbon on the door. And I think that'll probably happen sometime in 2023, probably late 2023, where we have something where it's super easy to use, and all you do is kind of pay your money, get your sensor, put it out there. Everything works kind of flawlessly. I don't think that's going to happen in January, but I think it's going to happen by December of next year. So kind of exciting time to be a part of it.
Keep getting easier.
Yeah. Let's see. There's a couple of, so what are the other projects? One thing I'm going to stumble through this year with Dirk, with the engineer that I brought on a GK kind of part-time, is we're going to explore this idea of like a weather net. So in the local valley where I paraglide is putting a ton of different temperature sensors at all different altitudes and looking at the lapse rate and seeing how the temperature changes with altitude. And that becomes something that's like, all right, now we got 300 sensors. Like, how do we manage that? And I don't know. Maybe I can cobble together the people who have the technical expertise, but it might be just way easier to use Paul's expertise. Be like, yeah, I'm going to feed all this information here, and then I've got to visualize it on the data side. But I think that's like I don't know, reasonably limited cost to experiment with running some kind of useful network, and the folks who are doing that, I think, they're gonna win.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool to see that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point about the end of expansion of the network previously also, and I mean, I think we're gonna enter in a different phase, which is, I mean, when I see the fleet of devices on my router, they are not individual. It's not 7,000 of individual people with 2 or 3 devices. It's
Right.
The big part of that is professional service provider.
Yep.
And I mean, they won't be here. You will never hear about them on the Discord or anything like this. It's
No,
I
they're
mean,
not coming on state
people
of the
that
network. No.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, just because in fact they are service providers are providing they previously had a private network with their own gateway, their own LNS, and so on. And there is a big change that they say, okay, instead of using my private stuff, paying for everything, and having to provide my own coverage, I'm gonna join the Helium because at the end, someone else will manage the LNS for me. I will get benefit of the gateways or hotspots deployed by others, and I will just add the hotspot I need to cover the part which is not managed by Helium. And they are saving a lot of money by doing this. And that way, they are expanding the network because where there is no coverage currently, they will deploy new hotspots, and they are more data only for sure because they don't have to manage the AT&T business and so on. But they will be data only, and this is going to provide coverage with a high level of service because there's people want. I mean, they have to provide the service, so they have to make sure about the level of service of the network. And yeah, that's a big opportunity, and I think that we're gonna see more and more of professional service provider turning to Helium because this solution is really open. What I mean is that at any hand, you can get control of everything if you want. So you are not satisfied of the LNS service provided by myself or anyone else. You manage your own. Everything is open source. Everything is accessible. You are quite sure of the price you're going to pay for the communication because it's established hard-coded in the chain, so there's no big issue with that. Everything is under control, which is different compared to classical companies on the IoT, where at the beginning they are not expensive, but as they are missing customers, they are becoming more and more expensive, and you cannot get your control back, and you have all this problem to manage. So that's a good and interesting opportunity to jump into Helium.
I'm
I
psyched,
think
man.
that 2022 will be
God,
good.
Paul, I think if as smart and experienced as you are, if you're stoked about this and you're reasonably skeptical, I think it's a pretty safe bet to push into it. So I think we can probably leave the kind of exciting piece there and say, like, look, 2023 is going to be pretty amazing. Let's talk a little bit about a couple other stats. There's the number of hotspots offline, which is a bunch, and then there's also the gaming issue. So
Yeah.
Joey, do you want to walk us, or Paul, one of you guys want to walk me through kind of what's
Yeah,
going on
I
with
mean,
those?
on hotspot offline, I did not update my numbers past 2 weeks, but what is I'm doing a different computation than Helium. Yeah, because the Helium computation on online offline is really short-term computation. And we currently have some issues. Like I see my hotspots. On my hotspot, yeah, I would say always have one which is offline, but everything is working well. I think it's more the validator that is having trouble, and so the hotspot is offline for 2 3 days, blah blah blah.
Mhm.
And also you have this, I mean, the distribution on POC and Witness, which is, I mean, not every day. It's a Gaussian, so some of them are more than a day, and some of them less than a day. So I'm doing computation. I consider that hotspot is active if it has a Witness or a POC in the past 7 days. So basically, this is removing all the problem of hotspot going down and then reactivated, or validator being in trouble and so on. And I'm following this over the time, and it has been quite stable. I see a decrease since beginning of November. When we had a big chain problem, so it has created a big reduction. But if other than this, it's in fact really more stable than the number you see when you are checking on daily basis. And so that's interesting. I don't say that everything is good and the number is really 100% stable and so on.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Yeah.
The number of active hotspots is decreasing, but in fact, the number of real active hotspots since the month of August is not 50% loss. It's more something like 10%. And August was the peak, the maximum number of active hotspots we have seen. So currently it's about 10%. But in my point of view, it means that we have to really take attention of the stability of the hotspot, because for sure, I mean, a year ago, when a hotspot was done, we had a rush on why it's done, fixing it as soon as possible, and so on. But now, when I have a hotspot which is done, if I take my example, I wait for 3 days to make sure that it won't be back on its own, and then I call my host and I say, okay, can you watch at it? You cannot do that before tomorrow. Okay, no problem, not an issue. And
Yeah.
I have some hotspot that has been done for months, and I need nothing. I mean, did not push my host to do things on it, because,
Yeah.
yeah, you want a bit.
I'm in the
But
same boat. I got hotspots that are down. It's like
yeah,
I'll get to them. It's not. It's a
Yeah.
different kind of pressure.
I mean, I think sort of the takeaway there is like we've always seen a certain amount of instability when it comes to proof of coverage, and a lot of that is just blockchain related. And I think one of the exciting things that we're looking forward to next year is this Oracle-based approach, where the hotspot itself actually generates the beacon and then submits that to the Oracle, and then the Oracle says, "Yep, that's a valid beacon," and then it can, do that actually 24 times a day. And so you'll actually have a much better sense of what is an offline gateway or what is an online gateway. Um, and right now it's really challenging to tell because a gateway might have just not been challenged in 3 or 4 days.
Right.
yeah,
And so it's totally wild. Um, and then Nick, you mentioned this other thing around gaming.
Hmm.
And I guess there's a couple of things to say there. One is like, yeah, it's a bummer that it's taken us this long to sort of get a handle on this, right? So, look back to the beginning of the year. This is when sort of the denialist stuff started popping up. There was the Nova Labs was running this thing to sort of like be able to bake in some models into the network. And since then, we've always had this vision of like bringing all of this analysis into proof of coverage. And sort of the tail end of this year, we're sort of finally seeing some of that come to light. So like we've done a bunch of research within Foundation, within Nova Labs, to do this analysis of this huge network that we have. Unfortunately, we have tons and tons of data because it's all stored on chain.
Yeah.
So we get to build these models now, and this is where we see like Star Watchers thing rolling out, where we're, it's unfortunate we're seeing tens of thousands of gateways being added to the deny list, and it's really just because it's gone unchecked for so long.
Right.
And that's kind of a bit of a failing of the network, and it's unfortunate. But the reason that we had to be really, really, really careful about that is because we didn't want to go launch a model that was going to nuke a bunch of honest hotspots. Like,
Right.
nothing is going to make people more upset than having a third of their hotspots get added to the deny
Yeah,
list.
you saw that happen last year. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and so that's why this has taken time, is
Yep.
because we had to get to a level of accuracy and precision that we were really confident with. And that's where we're at now, is we finally are feeling like we have some things where we can detect these attenuator clusters. So like,
Yep.
we've been seeing more of that popping up because it has gone unchecked. And it's unfortunate that everyone that's gone and done this is now going to end up on the deny list. So if you're doing that, don't. It's not a good idea.
Probably stop.
Yeah, stop now before your gateway effectively becomes bricked. But yeah, so like all of this stuff is shaping up to be what we had hoped it would be. And so I think next year we're going to start seeing all of this stuff baked into the oracles, and we're going to start to see a network that we can really trust its coverage. So you're not driving around with your mapper and being like, wait, where is the gateway? Why is this not working?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like a constant game of cat and mouse or whack-a-mole. It's like we're going to close one loophole, they'll find another, and hopefully those holes get smaller and fewer and further between.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm seeing in the comments this kind of back and forth between Bobby, Chad, and a bunch of people, and I think it's worth addressing. Is that, Chad? I think you're saying, or Bobby, you're saying that a bunch of validators who are going to unstake and sell their HNT, and you think that'll drop the price. I mean, we can do price talk here because it's not an official Helium channel, but I don't think that's true. That doesn't make sense to me. Like, I'm certainly not going to do that. I'm not selling HNT anytime soon. Anyone who lived through the kind of extraordinary excitement of watching HNT go up to 55, pretty unlikely to sell it too. I think and this is totally speculative, not financial advice, but there's a reasonable chance it goes back at least above where it is now. And if you sold now, you'd lock in that loss. I don't see people who have a ton of HNT locking in that loss. So I don't know that's a good hypothesis to think that we're going to see that token drop when they unstake. Let's see.
Yeah, no comment.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Let's do something you can comment, or you probably can comment on, which is the 5G mapper stuff. What's going on with that? When am I going to see one of those? I know at least one guy's been testing them that I've been talking to, but they're very few and far between out there in the testing world.
Yeah. So my understanding is they're still sort of, locked up in FCC approvals and things like that.
Okay.
So I think as soon as that clears, then we're going to start seeing those out in the world. This whole thing is something of a Nova Labs project. So
Yep.
The way this worked from the foundation side, so we made this big monster grant and said, make mobile work on Helium. And so they're doing that. And so one small piece of that is this mobile mapper.
Yep.
I've got one here. I think it's on some old firmware, and I need to figure out how to update it because it's not happy. As things go, they're a work in progress. But I've seen the app, I've seen the hardware. I filled a couple of hexes and stuff, and it's pretty cool. And the whole idea here is that you throw this thing on your dashboard and just sort of passively drive around like you would be anyway. Just the same way that people are doing mapping in other networks, and it'll earn you some mobile tokens along the way.
Yeah, no, I think that whole thing's going to be pretty interesting to watch it go down.
The other cool thing, which I'll add, is the Helium mobile cell phone plan is also effectively a mapper, not to the resolution that the actual mapper device is, because the phone doesn't have the hardware capability for it. But for folks that are part of that, they will be doing the exact same thing.
Cool. I think that answers Dennis Hyman's question.
There you go.
Which is kind of cool. Let's see what else
very
is out there that I wanted to hit. Oh, I think one of the things I've been doing some consulting over at GeoNet, and those guys are hardware and GNSS wizards. And we took apart a mapper from another project from not Helium, and took a bunch of pictures and sent it out to them. Like, hey, can we improve this thing? Can we do how do we help these guys out? and he looked at it. He's like, dude, this tech is super old and backwards. Like it's so far backwards, we can't even add something. Like there's no software you can add to it. You got to add some hardware to it. And I think the other cool thing we're going to see this year is we're going to start to see cross pollination between projects, where you have a project like GeoNet come to, maybe they'll end up working with Nova, maybe not. And they say, look, let us apply our GNSS expertise to these mappers and make sure that this stuff becomes unspoofable, because there's a technological aspect to it that all my head fully wrapped around. It's been explained to me like 4 times. I'm still not getting it. But basically, there's a way to kind of make it very, very difficult to spoof any physical location if you're using, I think it's the N-trip stream. And now I'm like way out of my depth of like understanding what's going on. But the folks who do are just like, yeah, it's not a difficult thing to do. It just takes, putting these pieces of hardware together and getting them into the devices. So I think that's one rad thing we'll see with the GPS spoofing that we saw early on, where I don't think, from my understanding of it, the hardware expertise was there to stop it. Paul, you got some of that?
No, this is where the IoT network from Helium is really interesting, because you can have a GPS coordinates, but if you report this GPS coordinate through the LoRa network, or I mean, just if you have a ping at the same time on the LoRa network,
Yep.
you have another coordinate which is less precise, but really hard to spoof, because this coordinate is based on the location of the hotspots around. So if you want to spoof this, you have to spoof the GPS. You have also to create a fake LoRaWAN network, and I mean, that's really complicated. It's mostly if you want to spoof it on large area. So that's a usage of the Helium network, which is also quite interesting. You can use it for tracking, but you can also use it for proving a position. With
Yeah.
it can be something like 100 meter around in city where there is dense network, or can
Yep.
be 10 kilometers around, but that's a proof of position.
And Neil and TrackPack were working on it. I don't know how public they had something about that. I don't know if they put that out in public, but they certainly had something where they're like, hey, they took what was it, Joey? They took the
That's very
information
cool.
from the Here Be Dragons thing, and they're like, hey, we're able to locate things within 20 meters or 50 meters or something, which is what I think, Paul, you're
Yep.
saying.
Yeah, just training a model based on those
That's right.
uplinks and the gateways that were heard. Yeah. And we're going to start to see, like you were talking about this cross-chain or cross-project pollination. Hive Mapper is a prime example of that.
Yep.
And that's a conversation that we kicked off at the beginning of this year. And, within the next month or two, we should be seeing that data flowing. Those devices are already sending packets over the Helium network, and we'll start to be able to have like a database of that stuff, for further network analysis, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's just
clearly.
like, go ahead, Paul.
And we see that also with WeatherXM, which is
Yep.
deploying a Helium device also, and it's also a good way to get a position. So basically, we had some issue with gamers, but what is interesting is Helium is also a proof of position for fighting against gamer in a lot of other
Yes.
blockchain applications. That's
Yep.
quite interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, we are a network for reporting data, but also a proof of positioning.
Yeah.
And I think it's really worth touching on that. Like we had this anti-gaming conversation a little bit earlier, and that's not just about like shutting down gamers on the Helium network. It's about validating all of the gateways that we do have, and it makes all of those other stories much more robust. And the cool thing about that is that we don't have to be careful about collateral damage of gateways there. We can just like scorched earth, make sure like everything is 100% trusted, because there's no like disincentive to the gateway when you say like, we're not so sure about that one, and you exclude it from that the GNSS multi. What is the right term for this? Like location verification?
Yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
one thing to I think is pretty important is to say, look, there's not going to be just one way. And the more methods we use to verify location, the more secure it's going to be. And so I can totally see a world happening sometime this year where you say, look, I'm going to use this proof of location piece, proof position that Paul's talking about on the Helium side that Neil and Rob Putt have been doing with their 2 million lines of data. And I'm going to cross-reference that against the GeoNet GNSS stuff, which is, if I'm understanding it right, and I'm pretty sure I am, that is kind of resistant up to state-level actor involvement. So I think between those two things, and you can decide kind of the level of verification accuracy you want or kind of trustworthiness you want, that they can be used across all of these other different projects, and we're going to see a bunch of really cool pieces of tech and ideas and understanding come out of being able to prove a location beyond the shadow of a doubt. That's going to change the world. So
Yeah, this
cool.
is going to be you'll hear this narrative a lot more in the coming year. I promise that.
Yeah. Let's see. You got one more thing you wanted to hit, Joey? The roaming will be a big deal in 2023. We kind of like glanced off it earlier. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about with the roaming side?
Yeah, I mean, there's this one neat little stat that we saw just a month or so ago, which is that our OUI that handles roaming for the network. So this is Actility, this is Senate, Tectena, all these folks. It has surpassed. It is now the largest spending OUI for the Helium network. And
I
so
don't
we've
understand that.
already
Walk me through
seen.
that. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we have Foundation console, we have the Nova dedicated console. Paul's got his OUI.
Yep.
So anyone that Nick, you've got an OUI that's probably zero.
That's zero. It's yeah.
Yeah.
I was 30. I was trying to be under 30, but it's number 32 or something. Paul knows what it is.
Oh, I mean zero spend. I don't know
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you've
no, it's a
actually
zero
plugged it in
spend. Yep,
yet.
yeah.
Yeah. So in terms, the number that we're looking at here is state channel, the wallet ID that funds the state channel, and then the number of packets that go through those state channels.
Okay.
And so the OUI handling roaming has transferred the most number of messages of any other OUI.
That's pretty
and
rad.
that little inflection happened just in the past month or so, and that's translating to roughly a doubling of message transfer in that OUI in the past quarter. So we're just, it's moving up, and that's what we want to see, and that story is going to continue. I hope, as if we can get more of these roaming partners to keep moving forward, then we're going to see more of that transfer.
Okay,
as they
so
scale up operations.
Like if I translate that into stuff
NFA,
somebody can understand,
yeah.
More non-helium users, non-helium native users are using the Helium network than native Helium people. Is that
correct? Yep.
Yeah.
So these are the big enterprise folks that are finding value in our distributed network.
Yep.
And yep.
No, that's super rad.
Yeah.
Dang, that's exciting.
It's very
exciting.
exciting.
And it makes sense. I mean, we one of the challenge we have for Helium is to convince companies that the network is serious, service is stable, and the quality is good for a lower price. And so the first that are confident about this are the big LoRaWAN operator that sees that the network is quite good, and so they use Helium to as a backhaul for their network, or I don't know, an extension of their network for a lower price. So they have a good margin between the two. So that's quite interesting for them.
Yeah.
And they are company anyone can trust. So people say, okay, I'm gonna register my device to CNET, and CNET will care of it. And CNET say, okay, I will use Helium for this because it's good enough, and it works well. And so the next step is that as users, as company decide to directly go to Helium, but it's good. We are getting benefit on the two.
I mean, it's kind of a bombshell. I haven't heard that before. Like that's an amazingly good piece of news.
It is, yeah.
Like
and Neil in the chat's being like, "Why have I not heard this before?" And you're right. We need to get that out there. Yeah.
No, I think it's an interesting piece because I've certainly talked with Foundation about coming on and kind of helping with the communication side, but I don't think that's my path. But yeah, it'd be cool to see that kind of taken on by someone and say like, look, there's a ton of good news out there. This is an insanely fast growing network, just not in the way that it was last year.
Yeah. I mean, combine that whole roaming story. Sorry, Paul.
What is also really interesting here, in my point of view, is that what is really wrong to me in a crypto project is when everything is inside the project. So when you just have money that is inside the project, and so it's like a Ponzi in that case. And what is really interesting here is that you have, I mean, your hotspot is getting money from the data transferred from the CNET devices, which is totally out of Helium project.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
see, there is an economy on the CNET ecosystem with some companies that have, I don't know, mappers or counters or gas
Yeah.
meters or whatever. Okay, there is an economy for this, and this is feeding Helium ecosystem with DC consumption and getting revenue to the hotspot owners. So it's money from out of the system, which is getting benefits to the hotspot owner. And in that way, the traffic is not only the traffic which is generated by the people inside the Helium ecosystem, but the ecosystem, the Helium ecosystem is getting benefit of the growth of the IoT on the outside world. So, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, if we have a growth which is
No, it's
100% per year in the IoT ecosystem or 300% per year, even if it's not inside Helium, Helium will getting benefits of it. And so the hotspot owner are going to get benefits of it, which is good. I mean,
that's
it's not money.
fantastic. I mean, it kind of bears out like the trust that a lot of us had, and that I've certainly had, is that Helium has got a bunch of, whether it's Nova or Foundation, has got a bunch of super smart people who have thought a lot about this, who've been working on this for a long time. What they don't have, and they've never kind of shown a giant interest in doing, is making sure that everyone in the network understands kind of what they're doing. And I think that's going to change in the next couple of months. So probably hire some badass marketing or communications manager to handle that. But what I look at is I'm always looking for the upside of stuff is look, here's the deal. Very few people know how fast this thing is growing and how strong it is and how good it is. Like, this is your chance to get in ahead of everything else, because at some point, let's say in August of this year, September this year, we're going to see the opposite of what we saw last year. We're going to see some Forbes story that's like, oh, check out this company that no one's ever heard of called Helium that's changing the world. Like, it's this giant thing. And at that point, you're going to see this giant rush to kind of come in and try and use it. And you got whatever it is, 9 months, 6 months, 3 months, 10 months, whatever it is, to like figure this out before anyone else hears it. So the downside of not having great comms is that the kind of insiders don't get as much information as they'd like. The upside is that you've just got this giant opportunity, like a gaping hole that all you got to do is fill it, and you're going to crush. So it's like, you think about what you want to focus on, I guess, is the message there.
Yep. I mean, just these roaming partners, right? Doubling down and
It's
you know,
huge.
increasing usage. They're like they dipped a toe in and they're like, wow, this is great. I'm getting a lot of value out of this.
Yep.
And so they're expanding. It's good.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's a rad thing. Jack Ladd, the one, who's the new CEO at Helium Foundation. Yeah, Bai's been there for a little while, but yeah,
It's honestly, it's not been that long though. It's been 2 months maybe. Like,
yeah,
you know, he's such a familiar face, but
yeah,
in his official capacity at Foundation, it's been a pretty short window. I've only had like a small handful of one-on-ones with him.
yeah. But he's been
Um,
hustling. I think he's been calling around, kind of tracking everyone
he
down and saying like, hey, I want to get on the phone with you and hear what's going on. Like, he's been pretty good about.
he is killing it. I
Yeah,
am so happy to have him on board. And yes, we are going to see a lot of exciting stuff out of that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's see. Request for another Helium House. Cool. I like that. Rob Putt surprised Big Dave Akers in there. Is there another Helium House coming, Joey? Is it top secret? You got the Miami thing. That's it. That's 5G though.
Yeah, Miami's going to be just a little small meetup. I actually don't even know if I'm going to make it out there for that yet. But yes, we want to do more events in the coming year. We owe Europe a visit. I think that's probably going to be highest on our radar.
Yep.
Um,
Agreed.
and yeah, we want to just, you know, a lot more of this stuff. You know, I'm talking about trying to get out to join in and dem hackathons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're going to spend some time in January, super heads down, just like really lock down our strategy. Scott and Abai have already done a ton of work on that,
Yep.
and so we'll yeah, hopefully be able to share a lot more about that soon.
Cool. I see Neil advocating for Helium House London. I like it. I'd like to claim that we did the first one, Neil. You, me, and Joey and the rest of the crew got the first one off, but I don't think we can totally claim the name. So it'd be cool if you can dual claim it.
Helium Shed, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's all out there. Ripping. Well, I think that that wraps up the hour that we got. It'll be super cool to see what happens in the next year. I'm psyched to see you guys in 2023. I'm going to go back to working on these sensors and trying to figure this stuff out. And Yeah, let's see if we can get a. If we do like a European thing, Paul, I owe you a visit. I'm behind by one on making sure I get out to
Yeah.
see you. So
I have missed Paul on every single trip that I've made. He is like on the
Yeah.
opposite side of the globe every time. So
yeah, yeah, I'm seeing all kinds of cool
In
things in the chat.
2023, guys.
yeah, we'll
So
make it
Europe,
happen.
Africa, China. When are we going to do workshops? I think people are interested. And so here's the other thing: is look, each of us on the call, we're humans, got a finite amount of time to do any of these things, whether it's a workshop or a meetup or an actual event. But I'll tell you, from my interactions with Helium, they are open to you proposing something to them. You don't always get everything you want. That's fine. That's life. But if you are in China, if you're in Africa, if you're anywhere and you're like, hey, I want to host a workshop, I want to host a meetup, I want to do something with Helium, reach out to them. And if you can't get a hold of them, you can certainly reach out to me and I'll pass you on to Joey who you can go direct with.
Yeah,
But it's there. It's all you got to do is put it together. And if you need help, I'll be helping kind of on the sidelines, making sure that all of the lessons I learned from the European tour go into it from Helium in the Wild. But I think we're going to see, ideally, a lot of that where someone steps up and says, hey, I live in Luxembourg, I live in whatever, Kinshasa, and I want to do something right with Helium. How do I do it? Is I think Helium Foundation is there to help out. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yep.
Ripping. Well, thanks for coming on, guys. Good to super good to see you. Happy New Year, and I will see you in the next year.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Ciao, ciao.
It's been a
Happy
good
New
one.
Year, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.